Welcome back to the Cost of Doing Business. That was the Reverend Horton Heat. You are listening to TLV1, of course, in case you forgot. We now move on to the next item on our agenda, and that is Teva. The past 12 months, as we've discussed on this show before, were not that good for Teva. Internal shakeups, reorganization, losing its CEO, not finding a replacement for its blockbuster Copexon. Last week, though, it got some good news, with the FDA approving a higher dosage Copexon and its share price rising. But then, this week, Bloomberg reported Teva just might be a target for a takeover attempt by the Canadian Valeant, who is reportedly looking for a mega merger. And this brings to mind the following question. Is Israel's biggest company now a vulnerable target for takeovers? At this point, I want to welcome Gilad Alper, Senior Analyst at Excellence, to help us answer that. Hi, Gilad.
Hello.
Hi. So, following the Bloomberg report, Valeant, no Valeant, is Teva now a takeover target?
Yeah, I think Teva has been talked about as a target for quite a while, mainly because the valuation is so low. Teva is perhaps the cheapest company in the pharma sector. The problem, I think,
has it always been like this?
No, of course not. It's a fairly new phenomenon. I guess over the last 2 or 3 years, Teva has underperformed very significantly the entire sector and became the cheapest stock in the
pharma industry.
In the pharma industry. If you look over the last decade, Teva is actually doing pretty well. It's only that the last 2 years kind of ruined everything that happened before that.
Yeah.
So Teva is a target because it's cheap. The problem is, for anyone who actually wants to or is considering acquiring Teva, is that at the moment there's still a huge amount of uncertainty. Despite the introduction or the upcoming introduction of the 40 milligrams Copaxone, there's still a big issue with generic Copaxone. And this is an issue that's kind of hanging over the company, and we might get an answer to that over the next few months. The point is that for anyone who wants to acquire Teva now, the price this entity might be paying could be hugely overblown because, you can pay, let's say, $45 billion for Teva now, and then 2 months later you have an introduction of generic Copaxone, and then you're going to look like a fool. So for anyone who's actually considering acquiring Teva, it makes a lot more sense
to wait. Yeah. And how long will be the wait until generic Copaxone is in the market?
Well, that's a great question, because for anyone to launch the generic Copaxone in Europe or in the U.S., you need to get an approval of the regulators, FDA in the U.S. and other regulators in Europe. There's no way you can launch a generic Copaxone before you get that approval.
And that's a process that might take a while.
Well, not only that it might take a while, you don't know how long it's going to take. The FDA can, in theory, approve generic Copaxone 2 weeks from now, 6 months from now, or never.
Okay.
So because you have that amount of uncertainty, it's going to be tough for anyone to acquire Teva. Now, if May 2014 comes along and there's no word from the FDA, then you can start guessing maybe that the chances of an approval of a generic Copaxone without clinical trials is actually coming down.
Yeah.
And then maybe for a prospective acquirer, there's some more confidence in acquiring Teva. But certainly, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon because of that uncertainty.
Okay. But if I was to buy, to at least consider buying Teva or a company like this, and I thought that generic Copaxone might actually not happen, in the foreseeable future, I might want to buy it now because now it's cheap. If we find out that generic Copaxone has been postponed for 3 or 4 years, right, the share price is going to just jump, and the company is going to be much more expensive. So it's a wait and see, but also an analysis game.
Yeah, correct. In theory, if there was a way to structure a deal to account for both possibilities, the upside in case there's no generic Copaxone and the downside in case there is generic Copaxone, then maybe a deal like that is conceivable. But, I think it's going to be a very, very complicated deal.
Okay.
Yes, you can take the risk and pay, $45 or $50 billion and then hope that you won't have generic Copaxone. But then if generic Copaxone actually does happen, then your shareholders are going to slaughter you.
Sure.
It's a big gamble to take, and
it's
you
don't
not
see anyone taking that gamble anytime soon.
I don't think anyone is in his right mind, to be honest, will take that gamble.
But is it okay? So perhaps, but it's good for Teva to be acquired, but to be swallowed in another company, because as you said, it's underperforming. Perhaps the best thing for Teva is actually to be bought up.
Yes, there's nothing shameful. There's nothing bad in any respect in being acquired.
Well, there is a symbolic one. There is a symbolic aspect. An Israeli company, true, a global company by now, but an Israeli company with Israeli roots being bought by perhaps a Canadian company. There is something symbolic about this. Teva is not just any ordinary company.
Symbolic, yes, but in terms of actual economics, I think it's completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
What is relevant is whether Teva continues to manufacture in Israel. This is what matters for the economy.
Yeah.
The economy of Israel benefits hugely from Teva exporting a huge amount of drugs, getting a lot of money and a lot of foreign currency into Israel and helping the economy. This is what helps.
Yeah.
Whether the shareholders of Teva are,
Israeli
person A or
doesn't
person
matter,
B, who cares? Look, even now, most of the shareholders of Teva are not Israeli, they're Americans.
That's
true.
So
who cares?
Yeah. Well, the fear, I think, is perhaps that if the Teva is turned over to foreign hands, say a Canadian company, then they might, decide to move manufacturing or R&D to other countries where the labor is cheaper, because they won't have the Israeli roots that some of the Teva's, current, foreign shareholders have.
Correct. Look, sooner or later, any company does exactly what's right for its shareholders.
Yeah.
Teva is currently manufacturing in Israel because it makes sense to do it, because most of its plants, or actually all of its plants, are capital intensive rather than labor intensive. They're getting a lot of tax breaks from the government, so it makes sense for them to manufacture here. By the way, just as an example, Teva, as part of their cost-cutting program, are shutting most or all of their plants in the U.S. and are moving them to Eastern. Not in Israel, and they're moving them to Eastern Europe. So Teva, whether the shareholder again is an Israeli or an American or another company, is going to do what's right for the shareholders, what's right for the economy. It's the job of the state to make sense that for Teva to have manufacturing in Israel is economically sensible. If Teva, because it's an Israeli company, manufactures in areas that are not suited for the company, then they're doing badly for the shareholders.
Sure. What's frustrating about talking about Teva is that every time that we talk, basically the conclusion I get is that we have to just wait and see. Teva is really in an uncertain, uncharted territory right now, and we just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, correct. Look, if you look at the approval of the 40 milligrams Copaxone, obviously it's positive. The problem is that when Teva tries to cast the 40 milligram Copaxone as a way to kind of fight generic Copaxone, you have to remember that when and if generic Copaxone enters the market, the price is going to fall like a stone.
Sure.
Just like it happens with every generic drug, although it might take time before the price actually really, really bottoms. Yeah. But the point is that when the price of generic Copaxone is going to be so low compared to the original Copaxone, the allure of the much, much lower price is going to overcome the benefits of the 40 milligrams Copaxone. Or in other words, if you need to pay $50,000 to get an injection 3 times a week, or to pay $5,000 to get an injection every day, you're going to go for the $5,000.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to wrap up, so we'll have to just wait and see until we have generic Copaxone on the stands.
Again, we're going to have to wait and see.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Gilad Alper, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.